Yo, what's up, kids? Time for another episode. We are going to go into Childhood's End. I got plans for some new episodes, but first I got to get this little group out of the way. We did the French pronunciation. We did the NLP stuff. We did Legati. So I've just been kind of firing these ones out real quick. Quick for me, anyway. Some people stream every day. It takes me a little bit longer because I have to prepare. I have to prepare the material. And then I do some editing because you don't want me live streaming at this point. I'm not ready for that. One day, I have a plan that one day I'll be live streaming, but I'm not there yet. Live streaming is one of those things that takes practice, and if you don't do it at least once a week, then you get rusty real quick, and it's not as smooth. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of my favorite streamers, they always have all these technical issues. And say what you want about my episodes, I mean, they're a little bit clunky and low budget. But at the very least, there's not all these technical issues where, like, the audio is all messed up, or I'm muted and I'm talking for 5 minutes and you can't hear me, or, you know, having to wait 10 minutes for the thing to start, or, you know, sometimes when they interview guests and one guy's louder than the other. And so there's always these horrible audio issues and technical issues that beset the live stream. And, you know, maybe it's worth it for these guys to do it if they're getting super chats and that's how they make their money. But for me, I don't make any money off of this. And, you know, I don't really intend to, honestly. I make these videos, at this point, I would say just primarily for myself. It's kind of like a way to review and go back and study something that I've gone through. But if it picks up an audience, then I'll take it to the next level. But for now, I'm just a working stiff, and I don't have time to do this all the time. And so who knows, maybe one day if it picks up steam, I'll do something else with it. But for now, you're stuck with what you got. Sounds mean, huh? I sound mean when I talk like that. So I don't want to be that mean guy on the internet. So the first installment of Childhood's End that we did should be episode 12. And that went along with 3 other books. I think I did The Wanting Seed on that. I did Catherine Austin Fitts and Milton Friedman on that episode. It's a nice long episode. Yeah, that one was like an hour and a half. The last one I did was the longest one yet, almost 2.5 hours. And I'll probably make the language ones a little bit longer because that's for my practice. Like I'd said before, like the language thing, I'm not doing a step-by-step program for beginners who are starting. I guess I kind of am with French. I mean, the whole idea is that I'm studying it. And I'm going to take you along with me. I don't have time to really like hold somebody else's hand from a beginner point, unless I too am a beginner, which I am in French. But with the Dutch and with the Russian, with the Spanish, with the Italian, I'm just going to be, you're going to have to meet me where I'm at if you're going to watch those. And so I'm hoping to just, get it to the next level for my own benefit and for yours. You can always watch it and learn something from it. And languages are something that Americans have a hard time with. So, try not to laugh at me too much, because I am an American, despite the fact that I grew up in Europe. But for the most part, I didn't learn the languages while I was there. I lived on a nice, cozy American military base with other American kids, and I went to an American school. And, when I was in Italy, I was a little bit more around the Italian kids because I didn't live on base. But everywhere else that I was, I lived on base and had plenty of American kids to play with. And when you're 8 years old, you're not venturing off into like downtown trying to meet the local kids. It's just, I told a guy that one time, and he like acted like that was like some sort of a prejudice thing or some. I think he said I was a racist because I didn't go out of my way to hang out with German kids when I lived in Germany. And the funny thing is sometimes the German kids would sort of like appear on the periphery of the housing area that I lived on. When we lived in Prüm, there was the housing area was sort of surrounded by woods, and sometimes the Germans would come through the woods from the town area, and sort of they would sort of show up and just kind of observe us. They'd be standing on the edge of the woods or something, and a lot of times we'd start pine cone wars with them. There was pine cones everywhere, and so we'd pick up pine cones and start hucking it at these kids, and so we'd be throwing pine cones back and forth. And I mean, it was in good fun. We weren't trying to hurt them or anything, but it was just funny. But we had that sort of Americanist military mindset at the time where we thought that we were special, and we really weren't. We were the outlanders. We were the, I don't want to say intruders. We weren't really intruding so much as we were the interlopers. So, although we didn't fight with the German kids per se, maybe it happened occasionally. I do remember fighting with some Italian kids when I was a lot younger. When I was maybe 8 or 9, I remember fighting with some Italian kids. But we moved to Germany, there was like a sort of like respect of distance there. And we'd have the pine cone wars. But it was in good fun. But we didn't really associate with them so much because we were the interlopers. Anyway, I'm going to get into Childhood's End. This is the second installment of Childhood's End. And we will pick up where we left off. So this is the second installment of Arthur C. Clarke's 1952 sci-fi novel, Childhood's End. I think it's his first published full novel, based on an earlier published short story, Guardian Angel, from 1950. And just to recap on what we've already covered, the book begins with a scene from planet Earth in the future. And much like other sci-fi films we are familiar with, like V or Independence Day, we have this sort of cityscape where giant alien motherships, or maybe they're fatherships, I don't know, have taken over and are hovering over the skyscrapers. And they have done this over major cities in different parts of the world. At the start of the book, they haven't touched down yet or shown what they look like. But they have established diplomatic relations with humanity via a sort of UN liaison named Stormgren and an alien representative supervisor named Karellen. And the main mothership remains suspended over the UN Secretariat building itself. I'm not sure whether it's New York or Washington, but it's implied that America is leading this sort of globalist federation. A little optimistic hat tip to Americanism for all the Yankees in the audience. We're still on top of the shit heap well into the future. So in the opening scene, we've got Stormgren and his assistant Van Ryberg up on like the 70th floor. Stormgren is looking down from his office window at a mob of angry human protesters crowding the street below at the foot of the building. The mob is represented by the Populist Libertarian Freedom League, and their leader, Wainwright, is presently coming up the elevator for a meeting with Stormgren, and Stormgren's assistant is briefing him on the situation. So Wainwright enters the office, and they begin to discuss the situation about the overlords, as they are called. The alien species who has invaded their airspace and dominated the world political arena. And Wainwright, knowing that Stormgren is poised to soon have another meeting with Karellen up inside the mothership, has some demands on behalf of the Freedom League and the Court of Public Opinion. And one of the things they are demanding is that Stormgren make personal contact with Karellen, instead of just him sitting in a room talking to him through an intercom, which is what he's done up till now. Since no one has yet reported on any physical description of the overlords, it has begun to arouse suspicion as to whether or not there are any beings present at all. And there is speculation as to what these things would actually look like. With all of this uncertainty, human curiosity has made way for discontent, and at this point, something has to give. It has been more than 5 years since the arrival of the overlords. And at first we only had one worldwide radio simulcast by Karellen, after which audio engineers and researchers attempted to analyze the voice patterns and try to come up with some theory as to the physical description of the entities. After their arrival, they established the World Federation and abolished war, relieving certain political tensions, and by this point, most people had grown used to their presence, but according to popular opinion, it was high time we personally engage with them. One of the other demands by the Freedom League was that the overlords lighten their control over our political life. That, although nobody really seemed to have a problem with globalism per se, because of course, according to Arthur C. Clarke, only globalism makes sense, and once people had a taste of it, they wouldn't really object. And that if a superior intellectual race were to be in charge, it is certain we would be more peacefully and efficiently be managed within a globalist federation. The people still didn't want to have it forced on them. They wanted to at least feel they had a sense of determination on their own. We would still have these factional resistance groups that demand some conditions of sovereignty and non-interference in economic and social matters. And so Stormgren, being a representative of the people, expressed the futility of such demands. And so they had their little debate. Now, at this point in the story, Stormgren is more or less the protagonist. But it gets a little confusing later on, because it's a pretty slim book, and Stormgren doesn't even last throughout the first half of the book. The central character sort of shifts to different people throughout the book. Karellen is present pretty much throughout, from beginning to end, but he's not the protagonist. There's George Gregson, his wife Jean, their son Jeff, Rupert Boyce, Professor Sullivan, Jan Rodricks. Then there was the other overlord, Rashi. Or maybe the Overmind itself is the protagonist. It's kind of hard to say. One just sort of follows the story. And maybe that's the whole point of technocracy. There isn't a main character. There is no I in technocracy. Ooh, I like that. There is no I in technocracy. It's just a deterministic flow of events, completely impersonal. And then the Earth is destroyed. So it goes, as Kurt Vonnegut would say. So Stormgren and Wainwright are having their little debate about whether to entreat the overlords for more sovereignty on the part of the people and transparency on the part of the overlords. For them to reveal themselves, basically. And it seems like Stormgren is more the type of manager who will side with the boss against the underlings than to side with the underlings in regard to the boss. But perhaps the good manager will take that position in the presence of the underlings and then switch position when in the presence of the boss. At any rate, Stormgren sort of sees Wainwright as a religious nut. All that talk about human rights endowed by nature, or even more outrageous, endowed by a creator. What horseradish! So up till now, he and Karellen had only spoken to each other via intercom. And although the meeting was somewhat inconclusive, and no real agreement was established between Wainwright and Stormgren, he did end up keeping in mind Wainwright's demands when he met with Karellen 3 days later. And so, where I left off last time, Stormgren had appeared at the landing site where a small pod descended out of the mothership to shuttle him up to meet with Karellen. And up he went. So now, 5 minutes later, Stormgren was in the heart of the mothership. No other man had ever been inside, yet even he still had not seen any one of the overlords. Having exited the pod, he reached a conference room at the end of a corridor. A blank screen attached to the wall. Karellen's voice came through the intercom. The depth, rate, and tone of his speech exuded both power and sheer size. Some experts, after having analyzed his recorded speech, had posited the likelihood of Karellen being a machine, but Stormgren did not believe that to be the case. So Karellen addresses Stormgren as Ricky, so I guess that's his first name. Ricky with an I, like Ricky Rocket from Poison. Or Ricky maybe from Better Off Dead. Monique, this is Ricky. Ricky? Monique. Sorry your mom blew up, Ricky. So yeah, I'm guessing that's his first name. Unless they've got little pet names for each other. There is the one overlord that they call Rashy. So Karellen told Ricky that he had listened to his interview with Wainwright. Apparently they possess some superior surveillance technology, not specified. Then he asked him what he thought of Wainwright. To which Stormgren responded that he thought Wainwright was honest at least, and the League itself was not dangerous. But he did say he thought some of their supporters were dishonest, potentially violent, and that he was considering additional security at his house because of them. The first item that came up between them was as to whether or not there was any real point to their secrecy. Karellen expertly evaded the point and referred to himself as a civil servant trying to administer a colonial policy in whose shaping he had no hand. So, spoiler alert, he's referring to the authority of the Overmind, a kind of intergalactic spiritual entity which controls all of their activity, and all living beings are subjected to it. It isn't akin to God. Quite the contrary. Even according to Scripture, Satan is the prince of the power of the air, which controls the governance of the living world. He is temporarily granted that power by God for his reasons and apparent knowledge alone. And although I'm relatively certain Arthur C. Clarke was no Christian, the character of this force which he describes in this story, controlling the AI in this transhumanist hive mind which later comes to fruition, and controls these demonic extraterrestrial beings, and under them, the governance of all the terrestrial beings. The Overmind seems to represent the very spirit of Satan, having jurisdiction over an entire galaxy, at least. And, given the current situation, Karellen found it tiresome, being considered a kind of dictator over Earth. Stormgren pressed him on why he was concealing his appearance. Of course, Karellen danced around the question, but Ricky assured him it was an unavoidable issue. Humans are just too curious, and in the absence of facts, people start making shit up. And the rumor mill was already churning out narratives and counter-narratives. Karellen then points out, quite predictably from the vantage point of Arthur C. Clarke, that these religious types simply fear the reasonable overthrow of the gods because, and get this in the voice of Anthony Fauci, they know that we represent reason and science. Barf. So this is pretty typical of globalist technocrat leftists. They're so smug in their faulty presupposition that there is no God, that it reveals their own fear they're coping with, that there actually is a God. And that is what they absolutely fear the most. That is why they are obsessed with finding technological means of attaining immortality. This is their Tower of Babel. And since Yuval Noah Harari likes to point out that the meaning of happiness is a person's expectations being met, and that's why he says lottery winners and debilitated accident victims have the same level of happiness. But then he doesn't justify his definition of happiness. He just goes around asserting things without making arguments, which is probably why he isn't very well recognized by actual scientists and actual historians. He's just a darling of the WEF and dickheads like Klaus Schwab. Yet it speaks volumes about how happy these people are really going to end up, because every Tower of Babel gets destroyed. And they are not building Noah's Ark. Okay, this isn't Bitcoin they're building. It's BitConnect. What's hey, BitConnect. These people are collectively trying to steer us into this abomination, which is bound to end in disaster. And anybody investing their hopes into the idea that they can transcend their biology and upload their consciousness into the cloud is a fucking idiot. You're not going to be able to separate the spirit from the meat in any real sense and live to tell about it. Okay? It's a scam. It's BitConnect. BitConnect. Okay, so just get on the Ark, but don't build the tower. Okay? We're Bitcoin, not BitConnect. And what does it really mean to get on the Ark? Notice in Genesis, the story of the Ark directly precedes the story of the Tower of Babel. It really shows the difference between the regenerate person and the unregenerate person. The person who submits themselves to God versus the person who exalts themselves as a God. To be inside the Ark is to be in Christ. To build or to help build the Tower of Babel is to exalt man as a God, to deny your sin, to eschew the Savior, and invoke the Luciferian ideal. The Bitcoin comparison was a joke, but it illustrates the point. There is what's real and there's what's fake. And there's a reason why we have an all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. And now we've got a smoking twin towers on our bill if we fold it the right way. Anyway, so where were we in the story? So Karellen says, science can destroy religion by ignoring it as well as by disproving its tenets. As if science itself is trying to destroy religion. Science has never been in conflict with faith in God. Some people who have called themselves scientists have made erroneous claims contradicting God, but unfortunately, we have a populace that is easily duped and ill-equipped to suss out bad research and logical fallacies. It is also unfortunate that many people who worship science and have made an idol out of science and have weaponized science have attributed to science powers it doesn't possess in order to do evil and try to destroy people's faith. The scientific method itself was born out of metaphysics and Christian philosophy. Science cannot be divorced from Christianity, much less disprove or destroy it. This whole idea in this book, Childhood's End, that we have these alien technocratic overlords who have been to our planet thousands of years earlier and then returned to tell our leaders, under the direction of a satanic spiritual force, I might add, that they know there is no God, is really just a masturbatory mental exercise for scientistic totalitarian would-be dictators. Because if they can convince people of the absence of God, they can utilize and manipulate the human's habit of religious submission to force people to submit to the almighty state. All totalitarian and fascist movements attempt to remove God and abolish the right to worship freely. That's why anyone who tries to conflate Christianity and conservatism with fascism is talking out of their ass. Fascism is absolutely irreconcilable and incompatible with Christianity, free market capitalism, individual rights, and Republican representative government. Everything conservatives in America wish to conserve about our founding principles goes against the very nature of fascism. The only way fascism can ever proliferate in the United States is to bypass the Declaration of Independence, trample on people's freedom of speech and rights to property and self-defense, and to bypass the Constitution and our religious freedoms. Because if you have Christ, you're in Christ, you'll never submit your body and soul to the state. And the technocrats, the fascists, the globalists, the transhumanists, and the Democratic Party in particular don't want us to have and exercise these rights. There is nothing wrong with nationalism in and of itself. The left lionizes people like Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. These guys were nationalists. But here in America, we are supposed to believe that nationalism and populism are equal to fascism. There is something wrong with a one-party state which seeks to continually erode your rights while promising to provide the basic necessities of life for you, which is the opposite of independence. A welfare state cannot coexist with independence. And without independence, we are under tyranny. If we are not dependent, what are we? Dependent. We are under tyranny, and our declaration at that point is obsolete. And we are not equal under the law. The only real difference between fascism and communism is scale. Fascism is a collectivist statist system within the rigidly defined borders of a nation. Communism is a collectivist statist system, crossing borders, pervading other nations. So national versus international collectivist statism, the retarded conjoined twins of socialism. That's what they are. Right-wing extremism looks more like theocratic monarchy. Libertarian, free market, laissez-faire capitalism is a centrist movement. So anyway, back to our story. At this point, Karellen is laying the foundation that these demonic overlords have been here before, like possibly back in the days of Moses, and they've been watching us the whole time, collecting data and studying us, and possibly having at least some agents living among us. And this fits right in with the whole David Icke trip of lizard people and all the rest. Remember, the television miniseries V depicted the aliens as being reptilian, under a cosmetic veneer of human semblance. And there was that one bitch who deep-throated an entire rat. I think I got my first boner watching that. But anyway, it also comports with some of the bullshit that these kooks going up in front of Congress have been saying about so-and-so knowing a guy who knows a guy who saw some alien body parts somewhere. These psyops about UFOs, now rebranded as UAPs, spelling out the possibility of interdimensional beings sliding in and out of our world through some portal, some thinny, as Stephen King would call it. Like, we thought we had problems down at the Mexican border. That ain't shit compared to what we got coming through the interdimensional border. Now these aliens ain't got no papers. We got slee stacks up in this bitch. Crashing their spaceships, drinking that space punch. We got drunk driving slee stacks, wrecking their saucers all over Nevada. Hanging out in the casinos. Where y'all think Andrew Tate came from? Top G. With a Bugatti. But they're about to give us some new technology. All because some teenage witch somewhere in Arkansas read off all the infernal names of the Necronomicon that she bought at the Barnes & Noble, along with some Funko Pops, and summoned Cthulhu to take over the country. And, of course, Cthulhu has purple hair and drives a Subaru. Anyway, I just can't seem to get through this narrative. Okay, so all the world religions can't be right, blah, 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 blah. Karellen says, sooner or later, man has to learn the truth, but that time is not yet. He says that their secrecy is beyond their control, that the reasons for it are sufficient, but he will seek out a statement on the matter from his superiors, which may satisfy and placate the concerned parties. Now, says Karellen, can we get on with the real agenda here? Or something to that effect. So anyway, I'll end it here. I know I didn't get very far in the narrative. I needed to go on a little political diatribe there for a bit. A little religious rant. I just get a little bit tired of all the hubris from these technocratic globalist types. Arthur C. Clarke certainly fits that description. Old Artie. So yeah, there's a lot of social conditioning going on in this material. A lot of the sci-fi has a lot of the predictive programming. They're prepping you for what they've got in store. They're prepping you for what's to come. Some of it's good. I don't know. I mean, not what they've got planned. I mean, some of the sci-fi is good. I mean, it's entertaining at least. I did start reading 2001, A Space Odyssey. And there are some similar themes in that book as well. And I'd like to get into that one at some point. We'll see. I got a lot of books to work on now. Maybe we'll do an analysis on 2001. Who knows? So anyway, that's enough for now. That's enough for today. Alright? Over and out.